think the United States made many missteps in the last 20 years, and so did Pakistan. And both countries are paying for those missteps at this point.
Yeah.
And U.S.-Pakistan relations were held hostage to the situation in Afghanistan to a degree. I do think, and I know this is unpopular to say in Washington, that the degree to which Pakistan had control over the Afghan Taliban was exaggerated, at least in recent years.
Yeah.
There was a time when there was more control, but in recent years it had been on the decline. And we're seeing that now, that Pakistan can't even get the Afghan Taliban to control the TTP, and this is a real security threat. But this is also
not even control them in uprooting the border fence that we've put. Apparently, there's a constant struggle over the fencing issue with the Taliban government, more of a struggle than it was with the Ghani government. So we've not been able to really change their view on that.
But of course, this is an opportunity to have a more functional U.S.-Pakistan relationship as well, because some of our security concerns overlap more than they used to. And I do not mean returning to an era of drone strikes in Waziristan or repeating the mistakes of the war on terror, but I do think there's an opportunity for more cooperation and also diplomatic engagement. But of course, that is stymied by the fact that I do not know that the United States has a true policy towards Pakistan right now. Relations are not in a good place, and I wonder, what's your assessment of U.S.-Pakistan relations, and how do you think they may improve or not improve?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on your assessment that the relationship has not been good for a long time. And last 3 or 4 years, it was downward. It was deeply on a downward spiral. Briefly, things kind of improved, although the spell of disengagement between the both sides from one of the closest allies and war on terror to this engaging broadly process had started many years ago. I think by the second term of President Obama, it was that whole disengagement was going on very strongly. And then initially when President Trump came, it looked like we were hitting a rock bottom. There were very hard statements from the new administration that came. The window of opportunity where I wouldn't think it was a reset, but things became kind of more static in a way, and we stopped the deeper decay in the relationship, was the peace negotiation process that started between Doha process that started between the Taliban and the US government, and Pakistan's facilitation for that. Not forget about the facilitation, just the fact that the US government was looking for a political way out of its 20-year war, brought Pakistan and the US literally on the same page, because that was something that the Pakistanis were saying since before even the war started in Afghanistan, since after 9/11, before the US even actually started the intervention, that there are political ways of finding a way out of this and do not go to war, and even after the Taliban government fell. So it's a long-term trend that we also felt that was a long-term thorn in US and Pakistan's relations, about the differences over the war in Afghanistan. Even though Musharraf era, we became the big allies of US on war on terror and supporting US war inside Afghanistan. But that's where the duplicity of Pakistan's the thing came, and we started being called this very duplicitous actor, because we on the surface we had one policy where we were supporting the war, but under the scene we were also supporting the Taliban. So I think that thing kind of suddenly shrunk when the US wanted to have that peace negotiation. But generally the drift in US-Pakistan's relationship, of course the catalyst was Afghanistan, but a lot more has happened in the region, and that drift seemed quite inevitable. US growing relationship, reliance on India as a key pivot actor for US Indo-Pacific policy, that role of India's role, Pakistan's growing relationship with China, which was beyond Afghanistan, which is something bigger in the region that we're seeing. So, and CPEC and Pakistan's close engagement, that has already had that pull apart on US-Pakistan's relations. What I think, saying your answer directly to your question, there is still, given these trajectories, which are very big trajectories, Pakistan is going to be a very close ally, partner, growing relationship with China. Again, it's geopolitics. China and India don't have border issues and competition issues. Pakistan has insecurity vis-a-vis India, long-term insecurity. China and Pakistan become, natural partners. And then, of course, similarly for US, India is a bigger player, economic player. So that, given that, there is still a huge space for a kind of a positive and constructive engagement between Pakistan and the US. There is an old reflexive understanding of each other. We have been partners for such a long time in so many ways, and especially on strategic, on security related issues, the military's equipment, sharing of that. And now, given what's happened in Ukraine, suddenly there's been a lot of kind of repercussions that have been felt in the region, given how India's played out there, Pakistan's own role, how sensitive the US was on the issue of Imran Khan's visit on the eve of the Ukraine attack, that issue playing in yesterday's conference in General Bajwa's comments itself. So, the repercussions of what's happening in Ukraine and how relations shift and how important suddenly it has become to get from the both opposing views of how that conflict is happening, or what role NATO and Russia will have, on how other regional actors within these sub-regions have on that legitimacy of action, of international action, legitimacy of Russia's actions, and how comments of a country like Pakistan are important. I think there is opening of space where there should be more engagement, and we should see more engagement from not returning back to any old relationship, but recrafting a more, whether it's a transactional relationship or whatever, recrafting a more positive relationship between the US and Pakistan. And also US is, if you look at US's own view of Afghanistan, whether it's from a CT perspective or kind of Central Asian, South Asian perspective, when you look at the whole region and the countries that border Afghanistan and can play, Pakistan is the only country which has a very strong old relationship with the US, which can be an interlocutor of US interest as far as Afghanistan is concerned also directly. And I see some of that still happening. So that's my perspective.
I agree, and look, the unipolar moment has been over for a while.
Yeah.
But I think for some people in Washington, the horrible war in Ukraine ripped the Band-Aid off and woke them up to the fact, okay, the unipolar moment is over. And I think it's not just the shock of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's also how certain regional countries are responding. And I'm a critic of many aspects of the Indo-Pacific strategy, but just taking it as it is, I think the United States is going to find that India's foreign policy is less predictable than they thought.
Yeah.
And it's more transactional than they thought.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of a wake-up call that no, these other countries aren't just going to fall in line behind what the United States wants. And so there's going to have to be a little bit more nuance to the relationship. In the case of Pakistan, I do think there's areas where Pakistan can play the role of interlocutor. I also think, historically speaking, when the US disengages from this region, it comes back to haunt the United States. And for that reason alone, even if it's not obvious what we want in the short term, and even if our positions are still being developed, engagement for its own sake is important, because if the relationship becomes chilled more than it is now, I think that will be disastrous for both countries. And as the Chief of Army Staff said yesterday, the United States is still the biggest recipient of Pakistan's exports. True. The people-to-people ties are very present. There's a long historical relationship. So it would be a mistake to basically let that relationship sort of drift into a cold corner.